During World War II, there were many incidents that received loads of attention, but there are many events that are rather unknown and will certainly blow your mind. Here are some crazy facts about the Second World War. 1. The American Ghost Army. The United States deployed a tactical deception unit, informally known as the Ghost Army. The 1,100-man unit was given a unique mission to deceive Hitler's forces and mislead them as to the size and location of Allied forces, while giving the actual units elsewhere time to maneuver. The Ghost Army arrived in Europe shortly before D-Day and returned to the U.S. at the end of the war in July 1945. During their tenure, the Ghost Army carried out more than 20 deception campaigns, using inflatable tanks, sound trucks, and fake radio transmissions. 2. An aircraft carrier made of ice. Project Habakkuk was a plan created by the British during the Second World War. The idea was to construct an aircraft carrier out of a mixture of wood pulp and ice for use against German U-boats in the mid-Atlantic, which were beyond the flight range of land-based planes at that time. The plan was to create what would have been the largest ship ever, at 600 meters long, much bigger than even USS Enterprise, the largest naval vessel ever. The idea came from Jeffrey Pike, who worked for Combined Operations Headquarters. After promising scale tests and the creation of a prototype on Patricia Lake in Canada, the project was shelved due to rising costs and the availability of longer-range aircraft and escort carriers, which closed the mid-Atlantic gap that the project was intended to address. 3. The Nazi Sun Gun. The Helio Beam was an orbital weapon project that was researched by Nazi Germany during World War II. German physicist Hermann Oberth drew up plans for a space station which would house a 100-meter-wide concave mirror. It could be used to reflect the sun's light onto a concentrated point on Earth, much like a magnifying glass. A group of German scientists at a research center in Hillersleben further tweaked Oberth's original idea. The Sun Gun, part of the space station, would be placed 8,000 kilometers above Earth. It would be made of metallic sodium and would be 9 square kilometers in size, with enough power to boil an ocean or fry an entire city. The Sun Gun would have been the perfect weapon to strike at any point on the globe, but of course the technology was not advanced enough for the Sun Gun to be built. Also, the Nazis estimated it would take 50 to 100 years to build. 4. Navajo Code Talkers. In the United States Marine Corps, there were about 500 Native Americans whose primary job was to transmit secret tactical messages. Code talkers transmitted messages over military telephone or radio communications nets using formally or informally developed codes built upon their indigenous languages. The code talkers improved the speed of encryption and decryption of communications in frontline operations during World War II and are credited with a number of decisive victories. Their code was never broken. 5. Japanese balloon bombs. The Japanese launched balloons filled with incendiary bombs, which were carried over the Pacific Ocean from Japan to North America by fast, high-altitude air currents, and used a sophisticated sandbag ballast system to maintain their altitude. The bombs were intended to ignite large-scale forest fires and spread panic on the western coast of the United States. Between November 1944 and April 1945, the Imperial Japanese Army launched about 9,000 balloons, of which about 300 were found or observed in the U.S., Canada, and Mexico. The bombs were ineffective as fire starters due to damp seasonal conditions, with no forest fires being attributed to the offensive. On May 5, 1945, 6 civilians were killed by one of the bombs near Bly, Oregon, becoming the war's only fatalities in the continental U.S. Called Fugo, the balloon bomb was the first weapon system with intercontinental range, predating the intercontinental ballistic missile. 6. Germans and Americans fighting side by side. The Battle of Castle Itter, perhaps the weirdest battle of the whole war, saw American GIs fight side by side with Wehrmacht soldiers. They had teamed up against an attacking force of Waffen-SS troops to defend an Austrian castle, which held several prominent prisoners of war. These included two former French prime ministers, a famous tennis player, and General Charles de Gaulle's sister. On May 5, 1945, 36 Americans and Germans, including one Sherman tank, the Besotten Jenny, fought an entire SS battalion. The German and U.S. troops held their ground for a whole day before being relieved by the American 142nd Infantry Regiment. While the SS battalion had many casualties and surrendered after the battle, there was also one fatality in the German and American side. Major Joseph Gangel died while trying to move former French Prime Minister Paul Reynaud out of harm's way. 7. Anti-tank dogs. The Soviet Union developed a program in which dogs were taught to carry explosives to tanks, armored vehicles, and other military targets. They were intensively trained by the Soviet military forces and used from 1941 to 1943 against German tanks. Initially, dogs were trained to leave a timer-detonated bomb and retreat, but this routine was replaced by an impact detonation procedure which killed the dog in the process. Their deployment revealed some serious problems. Gunfire from the tanks scared away many of the dogs. They would run back to friendly trenches and often detonated the charge upon jumping in, killing Soviet soldiers. To prevent this, the returning dogs were shot. Therefore, the anti-tank dog program did not have a significant impact on the outcome of the war. 8. The Polish Bear Soldier. In 1942, a company of Polish troops was evacuated from the Soviet Union and found their way to Iran. Along the way, they befriended a Syrian brown bear that they named Wojtek. The bear was subsequently enlisted as a private in the unit and became an appreciated figure. He liked smoking and enjoyed wrestling with the Polish soldiers. The men ended up in Italy from 1943 to 1944, bringing the bear along with them. Wojtek helped carry heavy ammunition crates and quickly became a celebrity among the troops. Wojtek was eventually discharged after the war and lived peacefully in the Edinburgh Zoo until he passed away in 1963. 9. The Night Witches. The Soviet Union had a regiment of female pilots who flew nighttime bombing raids against German targets. To avoid detection, the women would cut their engines before reaching their targets, and the sound of their planes gliding in for attack made the Germans think of the sound broomsticks made. As a result, they were nicknamed the Night Witches. The regiment flew over 23,000 sorties, dropping over 3,000 tons of bombs and 26,000 incendiary shells. Also, it was the most highly decorated female unit in the Soviet Air Force. 10. Gandhi's message to Hitler. Mahatma Gandhi was one of the greatest peacemakers in the world, but most people are unaware that he was still alive during the Second World War. Gandhi was so committed to peace that he tried to write a letter to Hitler, referring to him as a dear friend and pleading for him to stop the war. However, it's unclear whether or not the messages reached Hitler. So, what do you think? Which one is the most unusual? Tell us in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video if you enjoyed it, and subscribe to our channel. There are many more coming at Study of War.